What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 24th, 2018, getting into the week here. A lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, observations, and so forth. So let's just start right off with what's going on with Syria. And it's starting to evolve. There are basically three nations in there aligned, pushing back on the U.S.-backed militants, and that's, of course, Turkey, Russia, and Iran, who don't really like each other all that much. They've got different goals, but the common enemy seems to be holding them together, and that dread of what the U.S. government is about to do next. Now, a senior correspondent for German state media broadcast ZDF basically went on air. This is the largest public TV news broadcaster, saying that the Syria chemical attack in Douma was most likely staged. Of course, we all know that the story of Assad just gassing a bunch of kids never made any sense anyway. But it's nice to see people in the corporate media, even if it's the foreign media, start to stand up to some of these lies and propaganda. And it's a very significant development that we're starting to see this happen. Now, apparently 6,000 Jaish al-Islam militants and their families are going to withdraw from East Qalamun, which is northwest of the Syrian capital, and they're basically surrendering their weapons, and they're searching the militants, they're confiscating suicide belts, and they're finding a vast cache of NATO-supplied arms. So this never was a civil war. This was another covert regime change disguised as a grassroots popular uprising. The same stunt they pulled in Libya, same stunt they pulled in Ukraine, same stunt they pulled all over the world. And everybody knows what's going on. Something else that they've also found is another mass grave in a Syrian city that was until recently held by the U.S.-backed militants. And they're still excavating. They've found 50 bodies. They estimate there's probably 200 in there. And they were just thrown in there. This wasn't any kind of a decent funeral. They just dug a big hole, threw the bodies in, filled it all up with the dirt again here. Now, the IDF has hit Syrian targets again. No one, and they were basically, Israel claims they're responding to a single mortar shell that landed in Israeli territory in the Golan Heights, although technically the Golan Heights still belongs to Syria. And even the IDF is saying it looks like it was somebody fired in the wrong direction from the ongoing conflict, but they still went ahead and hit Syrian targets again. Now, Russia is getting ready to arm Syria with the S-300 missiles. In fact, my understanding is they're already delivered, they're already online. And this may be the reason why the U.S. CENTCOM chief made this, up until this moment, secret visit to Israel. Because up until now, Syria has been relying on the S-200 air defense systems and the S-125. Now, the S-300s have a range of 120 miles, which means Syrian deterrent reach now overlaps into Lebanese airspace. And this is significant because Israel likes to bomb Syria by violating Lebanon's airspace and standing back and using standoff-launched munitions so that they won't get hit. Well, with the S-300s in place, that equation has now changed, and in fact, the S-300 could even reach into Israel and shoot down aircraft. Now, Israel is dropping hints that if Syria retaliates for the attack on the T4 base on the 9th of this month, that they're going to hit Iran's air force. So that's Israel's attitude. We have a right to attack you, and you should not attack us, or bad things will happen. I don't know how that's going to work on out. Corporate media, of course, is having a good time with all this. They're celebrating the U.S., France, and Britain bombing Syria. even though it's a violation of international law and is clearly predicated on another lie. But that's the job of the corporate media. Convince everybody the war is just, the war is right, patriots support the war. And of course, for the corporate media, along with obvious influence coming in from the government itself, war is good business. People will tune in to watch a war. And so the media are going along with the war agenda, hoping it's going to improve their ratings a little bit. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. Meanwhile, despite Trump's recent comments about leaving Syria, the U.S. is getting ready to build yet another base inside Syria to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. Now, little reminder, the United States does not have the permission of the Syrian government to be in Syria. Syria's government wants them gone. And these bases basically represent a military invasion, an occupation. So they're still ramping on up, and now we're hearing more of this tough talk about how the mission will not be completed until Assad is gone. So they've gotten away from saying the fight is all about ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the war on terror, and they're back to Assad is evil, Assad is terrible, Assad is gassing innocent children, Assad passes wind in elevators, he tears the tags off his couch cushions, and he files his teeth into points because he thinks pain is fun, or whatever it is they're saying about him today here. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, this morning, Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron had a meeting followed by a press conference, and the meeting must have gone on long because they were a little late getting that press conference. Fox News kept cutting on back and said, any minute we're going to get Trump and Macron. Then they'd cut away for more news, and it went on that way for a while. Macron, of course, was lobbying for Trump to keep the P5+1 deal intact. And more about that in a little bit. But Donald Trump is out there thumping his chest and warning Iran of big problems if it resumes the nuclear program it agreed to curb in a 2015 international accord. Now, of course, Iran is saying that if Trump pulls out from the P5+1, they have every right to go back to working on their nuclear program, which was never demonstrably about weapons, but about building a nuclear power infrastructure. Because Iran understands the oil isn't going to last forever. And they never enriched uranium anywhere near to what it takes to make a bomb. So Trump is out there thumping his chest and acting tough. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's turned up the volume, screaming about Iran as the deadline nears. And we've been hearing this for the last 30 years. Iran wants to get rid of us. Iran wants to wipe us out. Iran wants a new Holocaust. And you need to remember, there's a Jewish community living inside Iran, and they're very comfortable. They're not being persecuted. Israel tried to lure them away, to move to Israel with financial incentives. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we've got businesses, we got friends, we got family. One of the world's oldest continually operating synagogues is located in Iran. There's no intolerance there. But Netanyahu's out there saying that Iran is all these bad things and they need to be dealt with. He was out there saying the deal has to be either fully fixed or fully nixed. Now, Iran has countered, saying that if Trump kills the Iran deal, they will leave the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that is a significant threat, because that would end the requirement for inspections of any kind. And Tehran's argument is the fact that Iran has fully complied with all the requirements of the P5+1 deal. The United States has not. They kept many of the sanctions in place. They've added new sanctions. The U.S. is not acting in good faith here. Now, latest news on this is that apparently the European Union and the U.S. have agreed on conditions to preserve the Iranian nuclear deal as it is right now. And apparently, under the new agreement, Europe and the U.S. are going to hit Iran with more sanctions. They're not going to end the P5+1 deal, but they're going to throw more sanctions on Iran because of their long-range missiles, their weapons of deterrence. So what is going on here is, I think Trump was looking at the poll numbers and realized that if he unilaterally pulls out of the P5+1, he looks like the bad guy. The optics are terrible on this one. So what they're getting ready to do is just pound on Iran economically any way that they can, just mess with them until Iran leaves the P5+1 deal, at which point Trump gets to say, well, see, Iran's the bad guy. They're the ones who pulled out of the agreement. Meanwhile, according to this article in Journal Neo, apparently Washington is trying to use a currency war to destabilize Iran. And apparently this is coming from people like John Bolton and our soon-to-be confirmed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, saying that Iran is in Washington's sights for regime change, or at a minimum, economic sanctions and chaos. So Washington is getting ready to wreck another country just to prove that they can do it. Getting on down to Israel, a lot of attention has been focused on the border between Gaza and Israel, but there are other things going on. The violence by the Israelis against Palestinians is ramping up. The settler violence is ramping up, destruction of olive trees. There's clearly an escalation going on. And maybe what Netanyahu wants is a third intifada to distract everybody from his corruption problems here. But apparently, Israeli soldiers invaded Abu Dis town, which is southeast of occupied East Jerusalem, and fired a lot of live rounds. They used some of the rubber-coated steel bullets, which, by the way, the rubber coating really doesn't make them softer or safer. It's just something that they do to say it's a non-lethal round, but they can be lethal. They used tear gas bombs and live ammunition. Some of the people were shot with live ammunition. This was the second time that Israel had gone into this town in less than 24 hours. And they had gone in the first time with dozens of concussion grenades, gas bombs, and live rounds. And they're shooting at kids. And what do the Palestinians have to fight back with? Rocks. Now, for some reason, it's still not explained why, but Israeli soldiers have abducted the dean of students from Bethlehem University. And apparently the Israeli soldiers basically entered his home on Saf Street at the center of Bethlehem and just took him away. And nobody knows why. Somebody made an interesting comment that we should all remember that, you know, Israel just didn't start being brutal and violent as soon as cell phones, smartphones were invented. The stuff's been going on all along. It just never got out. But in this age of the internet and inexpensive production equipment, the stuff is getting on out. And apparently there was this video that was put together about what's going on at the border between Gaza and Israel. And it was posted on YouTube. And it's talking about the unarmed resistance to the blockade, and include the killing of Yasser Murtaja, the Palestinian journalist, who was one of 6 journalists shot by Israeli snipers back on April 6th. So it was put up on YouTube and promptly taken down for incitement. It's now up on Vimeo. There's a link to it from my page, so you can go and see this video that YouTube says you shouldn't look at. You're not allowed to look at things that make Israel look bad. Meanwhile, in the Gaza hospitals, they're struggling to deal with this tsunami of wounded Palestinians, and they're wounded very seriously. We were talking yesterday about how doctors are saying there's some kind of exploding ammunition being used that just rips up tissues and shatters bone, and they're trying to deal with it. Apparently the hospitals are just overloaded, and they're dealing with blackouts, having to use emergency generators. They're short of basic supplies, and they're struggling to keep on up. All right, let's take a phone call. We're going to go to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day to you.
Good
yeah,
day.
what's on my mind, I just saw on the news, Michael, you hear me?
Yes.
Oh?
I hear
Yeah,
you.
on the news they had 619 murders in Tijuana in the last month. And they found these 3 students over there. They were in vats of acid.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard about that. These 3, I guess, journalist kids, whatever they were doing. And they were murdered, and we're bringing these people in. And, the audacity of these Democrats, Michael, allow this invasion and this caravan, the audacity of those illegal, I call the criminals in Mexico City, to allow this invasion of our country is absolutely disgusting. And that Barbara Boxer, Pelosi, and that Feinstein, and all these leftist, liberal, Soros-backed swine are absolutely destroying our country, Michael.
Yeah, and they're doing it because they need the illegals to
speak English. Let me tell you.
Yeah, they're doing it because they need the illegals to win elections. The Americans, people have turned away from the Democratic Party in large part because of the corruption of the Clintons. And the Democratic leadership has openly admitted they count on votes from illegal immigrants to be able to win races.
Well, you're right, Michael, but Donald Trump kept saying during the election that the election might be rigged and all this. So when he becomes president, he's saying, there was, I guess, 4 million illegal ballots. Well, how is this possible in this country? What the heck is going on, Michael, with this as far as this invasion? I'm not just talking about Hispanics. I'm talking about, you got people from Bangladesh, you got Pakistanis, you got everything sneaking through that border. Chinese. These Chinese are coming in here in droves. Literally in droves. There's Chinese showing up in Kansas. They're like, what the heck's going on here?
Well,
this is nothing but a massive Soros plot.
Yes,
finger.
It is, and the Democrats are taking advantage of it. And our borders should be enforced. People coming into this country should go through the legal immigration process. And by the way, I got a very lovely email this morning from somebody whose daughter just completed the legal citizenship process. They're very happy, and I wrote back and I said, good for her, congratulations. And that's the way it's supposed to happen.
Well, absolutely, Michael. My wife's she came from a foreign country, but she did everything the proper way. And she never asked for a handout. She never even asked for $1 in food stamps. But what's going on here with this caravan, this herd that's coming over here, I guess they broke up somewhat, is the audacity of the Mexicans people to bring these people 1,000 miles through Mexico on a beast train, whatever they call it, monster train, whatever, and to bring them to our border and tell them, hey, you can come right in and we're going to give you everything, Section 8 housing, food stamps, welfare, we're going to give you a job. By the way, Michael, here in South Florida, there's not one white Anglo male on the Dade County Commission, and Broward County only had 4 left. It was in the Sun Sentinel. You could bring it up. It was like 2 weeks ago. They had it in the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel. What happened to the white power structure of South Florida? There is none. The Hispanics have literally taken over the Haitians.
Yeah, well, and
the
Cubans,
Haitians are all over
don't
West
forget
Palm
the
Beach.
Cubans after
literally
Batista fell.
They've taken over the government. They literally came here and took the government over, Michael. They didn't come here to compliment. They come to usurp and just take your job. Because here in South Florida, I read that article. I should have sent it to you. I'm like, wait a minute. There's not an white Anglo on the Dade County Commission. But you got 3 Haitians.
Yeah.
Go figure that one out, Michael.
Well, the good news is that Donald Trump says he's going to stop this caravan at the border, and Attorney General Sessions has issued the orders and basically said anybody who sets foot across the border without the proper documentation is going to be arrested and prosecuted. And I do think it's time to drop the hammer on this issue. Trump has to know that those illegal immigrants who are voting Democrat are a major threat to his maintaining control of Congress and certainly for his chances for re-election in 2020.
Well, there's no doubt about it, because right now, Michael, they had a big thing on the news here on the news channel here about all these Puerto Ricans that came from Puerto Rico and Orlando, the Kissimmee area, and there's literally thousands of them, and they're living in motel rooms. And now
that's because of the hurricanes. That's because of the hurricanes.
Right.
Anyway, Tom, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the phones now and talk with Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, Michael, it's nice to hear that story, that email about becoming a U.S. citizen, doing it the legal pathway. I love that because actually I had a show about a month and a half ago where I actually had a guest who became a legal citizen. It took him about 7 years from Peru, and he did everything by the book, and I really commend that. I mean, it's such an honor to actually have him on the show and talk about the whole process, but that's not what I called about. It was just a nice feel-good story, and I'm glad you mentioned that you had
the same is true of my father. My mother's family's been in the country since before it was a country, but my father was born in Shanghai, and he came to the United States to attend MIT, and he became a U.S. citizen through the proper channels, and that's how it's supposed to be done.
I know. He was very angry, too. I posed a question to him about those who come here in droves and thumb their nose at the law and go to the front of the line, and he was very, very angry about that, and he didn't hold back on that. But like I said, he did it by the book, did everything right, and I actually had the opportunity to go out to Orlando to witness it. He wanted us there as witnesses in the honor that we could watch him become a citizen. It was quite the honor to be asked and to experience that, because I had no knowledge of the process. But it took him about 7 years. There were some hurdles, but and I hear these people that complain they didn't have enough time and they're being deported. They've been here 30 years and they're complaining they're being deported now. And he jumped right on it. And it took him 7 years, but he completed the task. So hats off to him. But the reason I called was because you mentioned something I didn't know today about building a base in Syria, U.S. base, which then brings me back to that whole. They're following that blueprint that General Wesley Clark spoke about, 7 countries in 5 years. So understanding that when they build that military base, they're going to fudge on something, false flags, make a threat out of Iran, attack Iran for Israel. So if that all happens and plays out, I'm just trying to figure this puzzle out. Because we'll be doing Israel's bidding on attacking Iran. So what else happens in the Middle East? Where do the Palestinians go? Are they going to be shoved out of Palestine altogether, and Israel takes over Palestine? What's going to happen? Well,
that's what Israel wants to do. Most of the Palestinians who were kicked out of their homes during the creation of Israel have been living in refugee camps in Jordan all this time. And what Israel wants is for all the Palestinians to go. As far as what the U.S. is doing in Syria, I think, again, wars are never started for just one reason. And I think it's significant that the areas controlled by the United States in Syria are the areas where all the oil and gas and most of the water are located. And I still think that the Balkanization of Syria is on the table under the excuse of creating an independent Kurdistan. But, they've double-crossed the Kurds so many times, I don't know how much cooperation they're going to get on that.
Is Syria part of the UN? Are they in the UN?
Yes, they are.
They're probably not.
Yes,
Correct?
they are.
They are. Okay, so can't they approach the UN and say, we want the United States out of our country? I mean, they have the legal right to do so. We were never asked to come into their country, so why can't they approach the UN and make a stink right there saying, we want the Americans out of our country? And you can't build a military base in our country. You have to leave now.
Well, you have to understand how the United Nations works. There's the General Assembly, which is where the representatives of all the member nations get together. When they vote through a resolution, it basically doesn't have any enforcement behind it. It's usually just expressing the sentiment of the other member governments of the United Nations. The only part of the United Nations that can actually apply force to solve an issue is the Security Council, and it would be a total waste of time to bring anything to the Security Council because Nikki Haley would veto it immediately.
Yeah. Well, this is very disturbing to see that Syria is not in control of their own destiny, their own country, that the United States can do whatever they want. I mean, this is a dangerous precedent. It's been for a long time invading other countries and taking them over, but I'm very, very disturbed by this because we know Russia was invited in to help fight ISIS, Syria, one of them, Turkey, and also, but the United States, the audacity to invite themselves into your home and then say we're staying and now we're going to build a home here and say the long run, I'm infuriated by that. It just really bothers me, Mike.
Well, certainly it's going to bother anybody, and the U.S. has been playing this game since pretty much the end of World War II, and they have tried this regime change on over 50 countries, succeeding about half the time. And we saw how they did it in Iran in 1953 and Chile in 1973. And they've just really ramped it up with Afghanistan and Iraq. And they tried to do it to Yemen. The people of Yemen are fighting back. That's what that kerfuffle is all about. And that's how the U.S. does it. And the corporate media insists, oh, these are organic civil uprisings. They're not wars. And then we find out after the fact that the U.S. went on in with non-governmental organizations, gave a lot of money to opposition groups, and just kicked up a bunch of chaos to try and force the government to collapse. And it looks like they're doing the same thing in Armenia right now.
You know, Micah, it doesn't seem to there be any benefit to actually being a part of the UN. If nobody will do anything and they just say, well, they'll just kind of rubber stamp it.
Yeah, a lot of people
we're
are
not
saying,
going to hear you.
Yeah. Listen, stay on the line, Steve. We got to do another commercial break here, but I want to come back to you about this issue with the United Nations. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Steve Elkins, and we're talking about how the United Nations really seems to have lost its functionality. As long as the Security Council is dominated by the U.S., they're never going to be able to do anything about Israel's rogue behavior or the U.S. rogue behavior. And I think that the planners of the United Nations should have put a little bit more thought in there about ways to remove nations from the Security Council. Because supposedly there are 5 permanent members and other nations get rotated in and out. But those 5 permanent members have so much power and it does get misused. And there have been complaints about UN funding not going where it's supposed to go. And there's a parallel here with the League of Nations. Following World War I, they put together this League of Nations in the hope of avoiding any more war. For a while, it did keep things on track between the various nations. But as the world got into the 1930s, the League of Nations began to succumb to internal rot and corruption. And ultimately, it collapsed. And that's when we had big mistake number 2. And so I'm not at all surprised to see the United Nations rapidly becoming irrelevant as we head into big mistake number 3.
It means they would probably formulate another agency, whatever, instead of United Nations, to be called something else. I mean, they've gone from the League of Nations to United Nations to something else that's going to be inept. But, hey, last question I got for you. I was doing a little research on false flags, and I think I may have stumbled on the very first false flag that I could ever find before false flag was ever invented, the term. But it looks like it's 64 A.D. with the Emperor Nero burning down Rome for 7 days, the fires for 7 days, and then blaming the Christians, rounding them up and killing them, torturing them. It seems like that's the first false flag I could ever find in history without actually being called a false flag. But throw that your way.
Well, that definitely meets the criteria for a false flag, but I'm pretty sure there are going to be others as well, because rulers throughout history have used lies, fraud, and deception to control their people. There's nothing new about that. It goes all the way back to Ramses the Great and the Hittites.
Right. Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, all bureaucracies are crap. And after World War III, at least you don't have to worry about another bureaucracy for about 200 years because everybody's going to be either underground or dead at that point. So you ain't going to have to worry about another UN at that point.
Yeah, I'm afraid you might be right there. But again, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Was that Einstein, I think, right?
Yeah,
World
you're
War
right.
IV.
I stand corrected. It was Einstein.
If anybody's left to lift the sticks and stones, Mike, that's the thing, to be starving to death at that point or dying of nuclear winter. Who knows what? Nobody's ever lived through that, right? So we don't know what exactly would happen. But I mean, we're already in a world war. You said it before. We're in a world war, people. What's going on now is a world war. It's soft. It's not hard yet, But there's going to be ups and downs. But we're in a world war, Mike. And let me tell you, the Russians just warned Israel, and Israel just warned them back about, hey, we're going to, hey, Israel, go ahead, test the S-300. But we'll see how you react to that. Because the S-300 will shoot those planes down, Mike.
Yeah, it will. It's a very effective platform.
I mean, that's where we're at now, Mike. I mean, Israel, the God's chosen ones, and the United States is the exceptional country. I want to ask people who are listening, what's exceptional about us? The high crime rate, the amount of people in our prisons, the outsourcing of our jobs, the bailing out of the banks and Wall Street and giving it to the small nobodies like us, the little people, the bill. Is that exceptional? Like, I don't see us as being exceptional, Mike. We're just another republic that become an empire. That's it. We were a republic. We became an empire of neoliberalism, linked to Britain and France and these other Western countries, and we're on the way down, Mike. I mean, I mean,
we're a failed empire, and we've lost a lot of what made this country great in the past. We've allowed our infrastructure to just crumble away to ruin. We've lost our manufacturing. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. We've even lost our edge in science and technology. There was a tremendous surge of progress that came out of the space program, and most of it has now been shipped overseas for manufacture. Everybody's screaming and crying about China's intellectual property violations, but American companies made that decision to send the technology to China in the first place.
And it's not like we don't steal anything. It's, the shoe's on the other foot. You know what I mean? Like, China's got 20 cities the size of New York or L.A.
Yes.
They got brand new infrastructure. They got brand new railroads. They got the world's fastest high-speed train. Like, they got the world's fastest supercomputer.
Yes.
Their science has surpassed us. That tells you everything, Mike, of the future. And AI, if you support AI for where it's going, they're ahead of the game now. We're not.
They are, because they've got a powerful manufacturing economy. And somehow Wall Street and our corporate culture got into this idea that they didn't need to manufacture anything or grow anything, that they would just take the money and shake it back and forth and it would magically multiply. And it doesn't really. It's just another name for gaming the system for the available wealth. And the U.S. government has bankrupted us all, buying weapons of war, which are very expensive and not really very good. It's the same thing that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. They were responding to Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. They overspent on military, and the rest of their society collapsed. And that's what's happening here.
Yeah, that's where we're basically the Soviet Union. Everything's been flipped around. I just want to leave this to one thing with people. Listen, if we're exceptional, that means everybody else is not. If Hillary Clinton's exceptional or the Bushes, that means you're not. You're expendable. You understand that, people? You're expendable. You're not exceptional. One group thinks you're exceptional. Another group thinks that you're expendable. That's it. That's what it's about.
Yes.
The Wall Street is exceptional. You're not. You're expendable. That's why they bailed them out, and you got sent the bill. Thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jim in Chicago. Boy, the lines are really loaded up today. Jim in Chicago, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I have two quick questions. The first one is, with all the fighting going on in the Middle East, where are the anti-war groups and also the churches? And the other question, why did Rand Paul change his vote last night?
Well, with regard to the first question, my understanding is that there are anti-war protests, there are pro-gun rallies, they're being totally ignored by the corporate media, which is why whenever somebody sees an anti-war rally, take pictures and send them in so we can post them on the independent media, because that's the only coverage they're going to get for what they're doing. As far as Rand Paul, I really don't know whether he was threatened or blackmailed or made some other kind of a deal. But it did come as a real surprise that he rolled. And it looks like Thursday, Pompeo is going to be confirmed. Former head of the CIA as Secretary of State, that does not bode very well.
Right. I was very disappointed with Rand Paul. In fact, I called his office this morning to complain about that. So, I mean, we're at the point now, who do we really trust or who do we really want to support these days?
Well, I think we're going to have to trust ourselves, is what it comes on down to. The U.S. government is hopelessly, irredeemably corrupt. There's no way to fix it. We're just going to have to wait for it to implode, which I'm seeing signs that is coming up, especially with all this infighting that's going on.
Well, not only that, did you hear today regarding the economy that they're concerned about inflation, interest rates going up, and these guys in the corporate world, they're making earnings like they used to.
Some of them are still cleaning up pretty good, but yeah, the economy has been deteriorating from the bottom up, and now it's reaching those higher levels. I mean, look at the stock market today. Boy, what a wild ride that was.
Well, Michael, thank you very much. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. Jeff Sessions, the Aiea brothers, and Deputy Watchman Schultz is on my mind. I'm curious when the Aiea brothers was running their little, I don't know what you would call it, their little intelligence gathering thing for Deputy Watchman Schultz and the Pakistani intelligence people. What do you think that they got on Jeff Sessions and when he was in Congress? I mean, he's got to be compromised, and that's why he's not acting. I'm just curious what your thoughts at all. How is he compromised?
Well, he could be compromised in a number of ways. Obviously, I'm not privy to that information. But with this NSA listening to everybody, the NSA has everybody's secrets. And unfortunately, so does Israel, because Israel gets the take from all this surveillance without any filtering at all, and that means they're getting the intelligence on American politicians. And so if these politicians have a dark secret in their closet, Israel can use it to get them to, for example, change their vote on Mike Pompeo. But they're all bound together by this mutual web of corruption. And we had an article that we ran last week basically saying that pretty much everybody inside that beltway in Washington, D.C. is tangled up in that Clinton Foundation. And that's why everybody is trying to protect Hillary Clinton and the Clinton criminal enterprise because they want to keep their jobs. They understand if the whole story came on out about Hillary's email server, that could delegitimize the entire government. And I'm still trying to find out if Imran Awan and his associates who were bugging the computers in the Capitol building, were they part of Hillary's espionage operation?
I would have to say, and this is just pure speculation and conjecture, I think you're onto something when you say that. And my thought about Sessions, I think it's going to come out that he was he was a Klansman. He was part of the Klan. And I think that's what they're holding over his head. It's not a crime, but it is a dark spot on him. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards and waiting for that to come out. I don't know if I'm right, but that's just my thoughts on Sessions. And I'm so tired of this nation-building thing. And everybody with Israel, look, I don't agree with the greater Israel expansion thing, but I do agree Israel has a right to be a nation.
Yes, and so does Palestine.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have a problem with Israel. I don't have a problem with Israel existing. What I have a problem with is Israel demanding to exist while at the same time demanding Palestine not exist. That, I think, is a problem.
Yeah, it's a human rights violation in my book, but, that's, what do I know? But that's all I wanted to pick your brain about today. I was just wondering if you had any information on what possibly they have on Sessions.
Who knows? I mean, I keep seeing all these stories about, pedophiles in high places. Maybe it's that. Wayne Madsen is out there saying that Lindsey Graham is actually gay, and they're using that to control him.
Who knows? We live in a crazy world. And one last thing, Dustin crystallized everything. And I was wondering if possibly you would have him on as a guest for maybe a half hour one of these days.
We might. We might. And just let him go on and on for a little while. I'll need Dustin to send me an email because our telephone system at Republic does not trap phone numbers. And we do that to protect the privacy of people calling into this show in case they say something that they shouldn't say. So Dustin will need to email me about that, and we'll set it up. Anything else, Kevin?
No, you have a great and wonderful day, and give Miss Claire the best.
I certainly will, and the good news is she's actually starting to feel better. I got her this high-tech back brace, and she saw the chiropractor over the weekend, and she says she's doing a lot better now. So I'm still not letting her do any of the housework or anything, but it looks like we may be nearing the end of this particular episode. Okay, thank you for the phone call, Kevin. We're going to switch over to Matt in Florida. Aloha, Matt. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just want to talk about two quick things. One being the current state of the economy, and two, the coming war. Mike, I really, really, really believe this country's done, and it's baked, and it's over. We're approaching 100% our GDP, and our deficit is going to climb to over $1 billion in the next 2 years. And I don't care what anyone says. And we're watching North Korea. I really believe we're still going to war with North Korea, and we're going to be going to war with Iran. I'll tell you why. You know, the rate our deficit is as right now, there's no way we can ever repay it. There's no way. And there's only one way out. That's by the barrel of a gun.
Nobody who's living under a private central bank can ever pay the debt off. It's designed that way, to give the bankers control over the nation and its people and just plunder them for wealth. That's what private central banks do. They're predatory institutions. And they exist and they proliferate because the leaders of countries are corrupt and would sell their own mother for $1. And certainly the idea of selling all of the American people into debt slavery was something that the Congress and President Wilson in 1913 thought was okay, because they were going to do very well out of the deal.
That is correct. We have been had. We've been sold to the highest bidder, and like you said, all of them. You know, it's pretty much it boils down to the survival of the fittest, you know. And what they're basically looking at is how I look at it. You know, they're going to look out for themselves and their families. That's what they've done. They've raped us. They sold us to the highest bidder, and we're basically heading down the tube, and there's only one way out, and that's war. You know, the situation in North Korea, I think, is just being put on ice for now. Listen to Joel Osteen, and he said it. He said it right out. He said, we're not going to go to war with them. When the war drums were beating a couple months ago and everyone was swearing it was coming, he said, no, we're not going to go to war. Russia and China's not ready. Give them another 2 years. And I'll be darned if you didn't come out. Now it's on ice. We're talking and everything's supposed to be going great. But if you notice, one thing is not being said. He has not admitted to denuclearize once.
Well, unfortunately,
you know,
there's been a big monkey wrench thrown into the gears regarding Korea, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show.
Okay. And also, I was listening to another program of a former Soviet spy, and this was back
Matt.
in the 80s. I wish I could remember the name.
Matt,
yes.
I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to take another break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're still talking with Matt in Florida. And Matt, you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Yes, I was talking about a program I was watching earlier with a former Soviet spy that defected from India back in the 80s. And this program was recorded back in the 80s, and I dare it was spot on. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand as I watched it. He was talking about it takes over 20 years to corrupt society, starting with their education system, and we see that with our Common Core system.
Yes.
It's just ridiculous. And he said within 6 months to a year, you can corrupt the final stage of the society through disinformation. You know, and you look at the stuff that's spreading on YouTube and Twitter with this flat earth theory and all this other disinformation is just ridiculous when there's so much good information out there that people should be watching and listening like this program here. It just blows my mind, you know. And I try to talk to people about what's coming and the current state of the economy, and they're more worried about what's coming on TV tonight with, you know, basketball than what's actually going on. I really cannot believe what's going on in society, and I really think it's too late to save it. You know, all I can say is people prepare, because it's coming. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but this collapse is coming, and it's not going to be pretty.
No,
you know?
it's not going to be pretty.
I like the second last guest with Kevin, and you need to get Dustin on. I really, really look forward to hearing this commentary every day. And I really would appreciate it if he would come on and just give us a good little 30-minute spiel of what's on his mind. All right, I'll let you go, Mike, and you have a good day. And people prepare because the worst is coming.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Johnson in Humboldt. I assume that's county, and I may have to take you through the station identification. What's on your mind?
So I don't know if sorry, I've been going through like some at surgery time with my father-in-law.
Ah, sorry to hear that.
But I've been listening. Yeah, it happens. But I listened, and I want your listeners and myself to know that the UN is in New York. You know, it's not that far from home. It always gets like put out like it's like this place out in the middle of somewhere, and it's really close to home. So, I mean, for the UN to have all these different edicts makes sense for the U.S. and Israel, of course, which is our 53rd state, to be a part of the escalation of anything that happens, period, right?
Yes.
And built on Rockefeller land, too, on top of that. The other one is that I was an aircraft mechanic. I was worked on F-15s through the 90s. And we got the F-22s came into process. And I actually got to work on some of them when they first came in. And I would have to say, when they first came in, that was pretty badass. So like all the other stories or writings or anything else that I read about it, because I'm not in the service anymore, really seems, but I want to kind of throw in something about California and how to change it.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to put you on hold. I'm going to have to put you on hold, and I'll come right back to you after our station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with Johnson in Humboldt. And just pick up where you left off.
Okay, sorry, sir, if I seem like I'm kind of tired and slurring my words, but I came up with the 10 planks to take the Republic of California back.
Good.
And I think it was like a thing that John Statmiller kind of put out. I thought it was kind of strange but courageous at the same time, as they had 2 Californians around him at any given time on Mondays. He had Steve and he had Ron, which I hope Ron's doing well. I just want to throw that out there too, because I really think he is a wealth of knowledge that a lot of people need to capture, especially after reading his first book. But with that in thought, though, I just want to kind of put it into place that I have what needs to be done to recreate the California structure in my head, and I wanted to kind of bounce it off of you. Should I just email it to you or throw it on the air?
Well, I think I would prefer that you email it to me, and I'll take a look at it. But again, I would like to avoid any kind of a uprising or revolution. I don't think the American people are ready for it.
No.
Okay.
It's all language.
Okay.
It's all language numbers. That's all it is. It's language and numbers. It has nothing to do with any violence.
Okay. Well, you understand why I'm cautious about that.
The third one says establish volunteerism. Reestablish volunteerism is the third one. Because we don't have that in the state of California. I mean, now they're mandating, the health and voting, and they're trying to mandate everything in the state of California. You know that.
Well, I think volunteerism is discouraged because the new model is everything being done is under the control of some bureaucracy or corporation.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a very dystopian situation. Anyway, Johnson, please email me that list of suggestions. And thank you very much for the phone call. And I hope your father is doing better. And we'll talk to you later. Okay, so phone lines are open. We're going to get on back to our news feed here. Let me just clear the screen. The Russian air defense systems, and by the way, Russia is just giving Syria the S-300. This is not a sale. It's a gift. And apparently they've already been put to use because apparently the air defenses at Hmeimim Air Base in Syria intercepted and destroyed several unidentified objects targeting the base. They're thought to have been drones, armed drones, used by the militants, and the Russian air defenses basically shot them all down. Israel is now responding to the presence of the S-300 in Syria by vowing to destroy the S-300s if Israel feels in any way threatened by them. Well, obviously, if the S-300 can target Israeli planes hanging over Lebanon, lobbing shots into Syria, or even pick off the aircraft over Israeli airspace, Israel is going to feel that they're in danger. And I think it would be extraordinarily reckless for them to try and attack an air defense site. That's the most protected point. Unless they go ahead and use a nuclear weapon here. Okay. All right. Now, Germany has decided they are not going to move their embassy to Jerusalem. This is coming from Angela Merkel, and her comments were made during an interview with Israeli TV, and maintained that Germany's official rejection of a unilateral recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Meanwhile, over in Tel Aviv, there are these huge rallies, thousands of people that they want to prevent Israel from turning into the Netanyahu state. And at issue is a draft bill that would strip Israel's Supreme Court of the power to overturn laws, which is what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. And so the protesters are very angry, and they've got slogans like "Bibi, take your hands off the Supreme Court," "Corrupted, you don't have a mandate," "Bibi, organized crime." So the people of Israel are not happy with the government of Israel. And so we should not rope them in when we talk about what's going on in that part of the world. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Bob in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. What I have to say is I hope people notice that all of the protesters, they actually produce nothing that is worth anything to the rest of society.
Which protesters are we talking about?
Well, any of them. They don't produce cows or wheat or anything. They live in cities. They run around with cardboard signs. They protest about anything, and they produce nothing that's worth anything to anybody else. And that's kind of what I have to say. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And I know a lot of people look at some of the liberal snowflakes as fitting into that category. They don't really produce anything. They just want to feel important, so they go on out and they, hold rallies for political correctness and, repeal the Second Amendment and all this other stuff. They don't really think it through. A lot of them are actually paid to be protesters. You need to remember that. There are public relations companies that literally will arrange for a crowd of people to show up and protest an event. It's part of what they call grassroots lobbying. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, here's an interesting story, and at this point, I have to say it's not confirmed. Okay? Saudi Arabia is claiming that the Yemen Houthis have captured 19 oil tankers and are preventing them from entering the Hodeidah port. And basically, we're getting this from Saudi Arabia. There are no other confirmations. And obviously, the issue is if this is actually happening, the Houthis could run the tankers aground and create a huge environmental crisis, not to mention the loss of all that revenue. But there are no details that would tell us anything. They don't even say who owns these oil tankers. So it may be that Saudi Arabia is getting ready to up the ante in Yemen, and they need to demonize the Houthis. And this may be how they're going to do it. Now, over in Iraq, the Islamic State is declaring that all voters in the upcoming elections, which is May 12th, are going to be targeted, and anybody who participated in the vote is considered an infidel. So Islamic State is trying to set up shop in Iraq all over again, because they've been pretty much kicked out of Syria at this point. In fact, there's another article that came out from Sputnik News on how these Daesh militants are moving to Central and Southeast Asia after being kicked out of Syria and Iraq. So that's going to complicate things for those nations as well. What a huge mess the U.S. has created with all these militants that they've manufactured here. Now, Saudi Arabia seems to have a somewhat schizophrenic foreign policy, because on the one hand, they're over in Yemen, killing the Yemenites left and right, women and children. But at the same time, they're still supporting the Palestinian Authority. And the Saudi Development Fund has just paid $40 million to the Palestinian Authority. This covers 2 months of their obligations to the Palestinian Authority. So the PA is finally going to get some much-needed cash coming on in. I'm sure they're going to be spending a huge amount of it on those Gaza hospitals, trying to buy supplies to treat all those wounded people. Now, according to the South China Morning Post, Beijing is getting ready to mass-produce hypersonic vehicles. They're setting up literally an assembly line like you would have for automobiles, and they're going to mass-produce these low-cost planes capable of traveling 5 times faster than the speed of sound. Now, obviously, we need to be very concerned about this, but China's being very smart. If you look at weapons development in the U.S., everything above the level of a firearm, they're assembled one at a time, like a prototype, and it makes it very cost ineffective. It's one of the reasons our weapons are so expensive. So China's just going to have a factory that's set up to do nothing but crank these things out. And apparently, they're saying some of these hypersonic vehicles may not be for military purposes. So it'll be interesting to see what they're going to be doing with it. Polls over on the island of Taiwan are showing the majority of the people, 70%, are willing to fight China to maintain Taiwan's independence. So there's another flashpoint. And Taiwan sees itself as an independent nation. Mainland China has insisted for years that Taiwan is part of China. It's never come to blows before, but it could very easily do so now. Okay, here's the story I mentioned earlier in the program about a monkey wrench getting into the gears of the Korea situation. And this is something that I said was probably going to happen anyway. Because, as you know, the media is saying, Kim Jong-un is going to shut down his nukes and he's going to get rid of this and get rid of that and get rid of whatever. That wasn't what he was saying. And basically, what Trump thinks North Korea means by denuclearization and what North Korea actually means by denuclearization are worlds apart. And basically, Kim Jong-un said no more nuclear tests, at least until the talks with Trump. But he's not saying anything about permanently shutting down their weapons program. For one thing, it's his ticket to sit at the table of the great nations to be a nuclear power. And he knows he needs a credible deterrent to keep the United States from invading his country. So what Trump means by denuclearization is you give us all your nuclear weapons, you get rid of all your long-range missiles, and just trust us, we will never invade you, which we have heard before. What Kim Jong-un wants for denuclearization is a much wider mandate, which is for the U.S. to get rid of their nukes in South Korea, Japan, and Guam. So they're worlds apart on this, and I'm not holding out hope that anything will be accomplished in the meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. What I think is very likely to happen with the meeting with Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un is they'll reunify. And they've already announced there's a timetable. There's a schedule for reunification. And once that happens, they're going to officially end the Korean War. These are all very positive signs. If the Koreas reunify, the U.S. doesn't have a reason to go into North Korea or be belligerent about it. Article coming out of the original antiwar.com talking about America's unsustainable empire, and that's exactly where we are. And we're officially fighting 7 different wars on 2 different continents, and under U.S. military doctrine, technically that means it is a world war. We're already in World War III. We're just waiting for the really big bangs to happen. But we can't afford it. We're making the same mistake the former Soviet Union did. We're investing all of the wealth of the people in the machinery of war, which is getting destroyed left and right, falling apart actually. And we can't sustain that. At some point, there's going to be a major stumble. I think that's why Trump went back into Syria. He didn't want to be the president who lost Syria. You're getting on back to, I was talking about this movie, The Post, with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. And they were talking about how McNamara knew they couldn't win the war in Vietnam for 6 years before they finally called it off. And it was continued by administration after administration because they didn't want to be the president who lost the first war in U.S. history. Not that we'd ever actually won in Korea. So this is a classic case where the ego of those people who are calling the shots at the top of our government is getting in the way of rational thinking. Yes, we'll keep the war going. We can't be seen to be weak. I don't want to be the president who lost Syria. Now, on Monday, 3 Republican and 3 Democratic senators, led by Senators Bob Corker and Tim Kaine, released a draft of a new authorization for the use of military force, or AUMF. This one would repeal the original AUMF passed on September 14, 2001, which gave the president the power to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001. It would also nullify the October 2002 AUMF that authorized the president to use the military to defend the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq. The problem is that this bill endorses a worldwide war on terror. I mean, it's actually worse. This bill will give President Trump or his successors the authority to simply invade any country by saying they sponsor terror. That's very, very dangerous. Okay, the U.S. Navy is trying to speed up their submarine production. They've been averaging 2 submarines. They want to fit a 3rd one in the same time frame, which I hope they don't make mistakes. They want to keep 5 of their attack submarines in service longer than expected to address a dip in the number of nuclear-powered fast attack submarines in coming years. Now, there are 52 attack submarines in the U.S. Navy today. By 2028, that number is expected to dip to 42. The Navy claims it needs a fleet of 66 attack submarines to deter Russian aggression. Now, some of the gear the military acquire looks more like hobby vehicles than anything else, and one of them is this Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, which is a militarized, glorified dune buggy, and it's a 2-man crew, and it's used to basically go on out and scout around, forward controllers and so forth. But apparently it is proving to be very, very vulnerable to attack, which if you look at a picture of this thing, you can see, yeah, it's wide open. So their Marines are going to add Stinger missiles and lasers to make up for the lagging air defense. And that, of course, will cost a lot more money. And again, if you've never seen it, there's a wonderful movie called The Pentagon Wars that really shows how military procurement operates. It's very lighthearted, very entertaining, but it's based on a true story of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle and how these decisions get made. And I got to see a lot of this when I was working for Able Image Research, and we actually had a contract connected to the Strategic Defense Initiative. And it was just crazy. It was just crazy. Apparently, John Bolton used to be the head of a nonprofit organization that promoted misleading and false anti-Muslim news. So here we have a guy who is got a built-in bias. He wants the Muslims to be made war on. And this guy is now our national security advisor. All right, looking at the domestic politics, here's where it gets interesting. The Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee announced Monday that they've reached a deal with the Department of Justice for Hillary Clinton's probe documents. These are the documents about the decision-making process leading to James Comey and Loretta Lynch giving Hillary a get-out-of-jail-free card. My comments about this after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about this story where the House Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee have reached a deal with the Department of Justice for the documents related to the decision-making process which led to James Comey and Loretta Lynch giving Hillary Clinton a get-out-of-jail-free card. And my question is, why was a deal required? The reason that we have three branches of government is they're supposed to keep an eye on each other, and Congress has every right to demand those documents from the Department of Justice and get them. The Department of Justice does not have a legal basis to refuse. So, apparently the Department of Justice has lawyered up, and they're trying to keep the lid on this stuff. This screams of cover-up. This is like a flashing neon sign glued to their forehead saying, guilty, 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 guilty. I don't think they understand the optics of this, of what it looks like when Congress has to fight to get documents to which they are entitled to. Now, apparently, a Clinton associate, Alexander Downer, is refusing to confirm or deny that he met with George Papadopoulos in London at a bar in 2016. He's also refusing to say if the Mueller special counsel or the FBI interviewed him. Again, more signs of a cover-up here. Sebastian Gorka is out there saying the FBI FISA abuse scandal should be renamed Obamagate. We've already been doing that. All right, let's take some phone calls. Brian in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
This is about yesterday's show. You were talking about how the Israeli army was shooting like people in the joints and they were like exploding.
Yep.
Nobody called in about it, but it's called a ballistic tip. What it is, it's basically a hollow point, but there's a little plastic tip that goes onto it that makes it really accurate. What happens is when you hit anything, the little plastic tip shoves back into the bullet and causes it to violently open, causing it to do, it's usually for varmint hunting, but you can pretty much adapt it for almost anything, and it makes a very powerful entry wound.
Oh boy, that's really, really nasty. And I would assume it's got to be illegal under international law.
I
had a lot of people who sent me email about various types of exploding and fragmentation bombs, bullets rather, some of which apparently you can buy, just as a regular gun owner, which, I can't see.
When I go hunting, when I go varmint hunting, I take ballistic tips with me. Nosler makes them, almost everybody makes them, they're called Farmageddon rounds. And I reload all the time, and that's what I take for groundhogs, coyotes, anything, because what it does, it drops that in a second. You hit anything, and it's done for.
Well, my goodness, I guess that's what I was doing wrong when I would varmint the garden as a farm kid. I just had a .22.
Well, I mean, for a 223, that's what I use for hunting coyotes and groundhog. And if you reload your own ammo, ballistic tips are the best thing you could buy.
Boy, that's nasty. That is really nasty. But again, the doctors in Gaza are saying the Israelis are using something that's a non-standard round, and it's just causing horrific amounts of damage.
That was weird. Okay, that's all I got for you, Mike. You have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to start with Curtis in Nevada. Curtis, I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, something about the United Nations. People have the idea that it started after World War II to try to bring the nations together in a diplomatic way, but it always was part of the globalist agenda. They tried it with the League of Nations, and the United States didn't ratify it, so World War II happened because they got the UN, and the UN always was. There eventually was going to be the head of the global government, at least front-wise. The powers behind them were going to use the UN. So that would explain the UN not being impartial or being objective in anything, that they have their agenda too. And so I wouldn't think that they or anything. But anyway,
I have an associate who used to be a credentialed person of the press at the UN, and eventually the credentials were revoked. But this person communicated to me that there is just so much corruption inside the United Nations. I mean, the more power that you concentrate in a single location, the more corrupt it's going to become.
Yeah, the UN is deep state international. It's. I'm going to make a comment on blue pill people. Is that these blue? I can't understand is that you can have a
Curtis, I got to put you on hold. I warned you this was going to happen. Stay on the line. I'll come right back to you. We got a bunch of other people waiting on the lines. Stay tuned. Aloha America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Curtis in Nevada. And Curtis, you had something else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment on the blue pill people in this country, that they are the ones that if we go down as a country or as a world, it's because of these people. It's that you can run 10 false flags once a week for 10 weeks. And on the 10th week, those people are still going to buy the narrative. And that's what's killing us. That's the only thing the deep state has left, really, is to just run another false flag, which I think is happening right now as we speak.
Well, I'm afraid you're right, and I'm afraid that the next false flag is going to be big and ugly and inside the United States itself, just to maximize the shock value, because people just aren't buying these gas attacks in Syria. We know this government lies. It lied about Saddam's nukes. It's lied about, huge numbers of things. The government is dealing with a credibility problem of its own making. So is the corporate media. And they've lost the ability to lie to the people with impunity. And without that, they can't rule as they define rulership.
But they can still pass legislation based on what everybody, 90% of the population knows isn't true, but 60% of them are just going to keep their mouth shut. And that's, even family members. If you talk to them, they'll say something that, okay, maybe I can give you a little bit of knowledge of that. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. In other words, they limit anything they don't want to hear because I don't know what it is. They're like adult children, perpetual children.
No, what's going on here? What's going on here is we're all raised to think that we're good people. We all watch TV and movies, and we like to imagine that were we to see corruption in government or injustice of any kind, that we would have the courage to do something about it. But when you're actually confronted with that, then you have to make that choice. Are you going to do something about the injustice that you're seeing in front of you? That carries a lot of risks. Or are you just going to go along with it and surrender that image of being a good human being? And most people don't even want to face that choice. And so they'll gratefully accept whatever propaganda is being offered to them so that they can go on thinking that they're good people, that they would fight injustice. They just don't see a reason to have to do it right now, this moment. And it is self-deception, but that's one of the ways that people are controlled, by giving them that self-image and then trapping them with it. It is a gross self-deception. There's no two ways about it.
Right. That works both ways, Mike, in real life, social life, and in religion, because those are the two things that people are afraid of to question what they're told not to question. You know, and, the majority of people in this country, the Christians, they back Israel because that's the absolute tenets of Christianity, that the God of the Bible says you must back my people, and that they do it without unthinking about it. And that's the biggest problem I think we have.
Well, that is a big problem, especially with the Christian Zionists, and depending upon which version of the Bible you're looking at, and there are dozens of them out there, the dictum for Christians to support Israel on questioning is actually not in most of them. You find it in the Schofield Bible, and of course Israel's propagandists are always putting it on out there that, you know, Christians are obligated to support Israel no matter what. The good news is that support is slipping, and the number of people who identify as Christian Zionists is on decline. You have American Jews who are now openly protesting what Netanyahu is doing. And so this carefully crafted 70-year propaganda hoax is starting to crumble around the edges.
You know, Mike, you had a caller a couple of weeks ago that he said he had a show of his own. And I remember thinking at the time that, you know, if you had other alternate types calling in and maybe a segment or two on your show and you did the same, you can really expand, you know, the exposure of your show, their show, and the whole movement. That would be pretty awesome because you guys have more resources and more content. What do you think about that?
I'm not exactly sure what you were saying. We had a caller into the show, and
another talk show host. Like I think you had a guy named Reed or something. And you know, if you could, like, let's say a guy from another show has a show, he calls up and you guys, you know, talk for maybe 2 segments, maybe take a call or two, and then you do the same on his show. And that kind of thing can really put a lot of exposure to the audiences that listen to these shows.
Well, I do a lot of other people's radio shows, not on this network. In fact, for our Hawaii listeners, this Thursday, just after 4 p.m., I'm going to be on KKCR, Kauai Community Radio, which has repeaters on Oahu, and I'll be posting an announcement about that. I do the Jim Goddard Show every week. And so, yeah, I'm getting on out there. Anyway, Curtis, thank you for the phone call. Thank you for the suggestion. We're going to let you go and switch over to Vivian in Canada. Aloha, Vivian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Hi, Mike. You said earlier in the show that Israel's violence is not a recent thing. It's not attributable only to modern technology. And, of course, you're absolutely right. It was born in violence. Even during the days preceding the creation of the State of Israel, the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Stern gangs were all very active in terrorism, as many people know. But what they may not know is that many of the ships that were bringing illegal refugees into Palestine during the mandatory period, there were a few that were bombed where the people on the ships, because they weren't allowed by the British to unload into Palestine, many of those were actually bombed by the Haganah, Irgun, and Stern gangs in order to elicit sympathy from the world and to silence any objections to the illegal immigration of Jews who would eventually outnumber the Palestinians. So once it's born with that kind of, and of course a lot of those people the leaders were among the prime ministers of
Yes.
Israel, Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir. In fact, they even killed the first UN mediator. The UN was a new institution. Its first mediator was specifically for this Palestinian Zionist issue was Count Folk Bernadotte, who was assassinated on the orders of Yitzhak Shamir. And the irony is that the reason he was assassinated is because Bernadotte wanted to keep Jerusalem as an international zone and not allow it to become part of either the new state of Palestine or the new state of Israel in the two-state solution that he was proposing. So that's why he was assassinated, because having Jerusalem was essential to their ideology in order to attract Jewish supporters who became actually the victims of the ideology of being the chosen people. It's a very seductive ideology.
Yes.
This being there being only one God, and we are the ones that he chose, and therefore we have essentially exceptionalism. And this is another thing that I think that brings us into our modern day dilemma. The U.S. itself is based on the concept of manifest destiny and exceptionalism, thus making it very amenable to become the ally of Israel all along, and for their joint propaganda to have been two parts of the same coin. Many of the symbols actually are very similar. So I don't know how this can ever be. Israel will never recognize or accept the Palestinians. They're going to drive them out, regardless of who has the actual right in common logic or in the divine logic. And on the issue of the Christian Zionists, there's something they need to remember. If Jesus was actually a learned rabbi, the very idea of consuming blood is odious and is forbidden way back to the days of Noah. So the concept of Jesus at the Last Supper being a rabbi and saying, drink this wine as my blood and eat my flesh when you eat this bread, symbolically, that's a form of cannibalism.
Yes.
It's utterly inconceivable that a true Jewish rabbi or Judean rabbi would ever have said such a thing. So it is clearly a fabrication. And to say this, I know it's going to alienate a lot of your listeners, but it's time they recognize that the exploitation of this symbolism has actually made them complicit in the very sins that they profess to abhor. Now, the question is, even if we all came to the conclusion that Israel is committing atrocities that endanger the entire planet, and this is what makes me angry. When I was there the last time, I remember leaving thinking, I have never seen two enemies that deserve each other more. Neither side is going to yield, and they are determined one or the other is going to kill the other. Neither will succeed in that goal. But in their vortex of hatred, the whole planet, we're being drawn in. What can we do? I mean, Europe is useless because each former nation is now involved with its domestic issues of having to deal with violent migrants. And so they can't actually take action. The UN is so corrupt as no one can possibly deny that anymore. Who then? What? Recognizing the problem is not enough. Simply diagnosing a disease is not adequate to heal it.
Yes.
What can we do? What are the possibilities?
Well,
without having to resort to violence to disarm Israel. If that's what has to be done. Israel must be disarmed. It's not Iran that is the culprit with regard to being needing to be disarmed. In fact, Iran has as much or greater a claim on the area that is known as Israel, Palestine, and all that since the days of of Cyrus the Great. That's because many of the people in that area are actually of Persian, and even the Greeks are dispersed throughout the entire region. There is no one single group that can claim that they have an initial indigenous right. Nobody is indigenous. Everybody migrated from somewhere, and everybody interbred. So now we have to ask ourselves, how do we disarm Israel? Is it too late?
It may well be too late, and obviously what would help is if all these different countries that support Israel, because it's not just the United States that Israel parasitizes upon, if they were just to cut that off. But again, Israel has successfully infiltrated governments around the world. The Israel lobby is very powerful in the United States. It's very powerful in Great Britain. I assume that there are equivalent organizations in most of the European nations. And they just siphon off money and they send it to Israel. And Israel buys weapons. And even though Israel promises they're for defensive use only, they obviously keep attacking their neighbors. And I think during the next dust-up, they're looking for a reason to go back into Lebanon right now because they still want that Litani River.
What do you think they've done to make Egypt so compliant and so silent? This is what stuns me. Now, I know they got rid of Mohammed Morsi, but what did they do to make al-Sisi so compliant? That he's even blocked off the Gaza access to life-sustaining products that used to come over the joint Gaza-Egyptian border.
Well,
what's happening there? I don't understand.
They may have just given them the job and he feels appropriately grateful for it, or there may have been a threat by Israel. Egypt depends in great deal on their tourism revenue, and Israel might have just said, you know, it's a nice pyramid you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. We don't know, but al-Sisi is definitely under control.
Yes, he's clearly under control, as is Trump now, as he always has been, even though he didn't realize it. The Oedipal, I mean, the Oedipal Macron of France, he's useless. Israel is preoccupied. The only one who seems to be standing up to anybody is Viktor Orban, and whether he's going to be able, well, actually, even the Czechs, the Czech president, unfortunately, he's been involved in a scandal, and I think his name is Babiš,
yes.
Which ironically is a name that is common in Palestine. And the one step down is a man named Zaman. That's also a name that was common in Palestine. So they were obviously migrants. But other than the Czechs, who have now been neutralized by these scandals, and Viktor Orban, who seems to be standing alone, who is actually going to stand up and do something?
At this point, I think we're headed into a global war, and the only thing that we can really do is just be prepared to take care of ourselves and our families and get through it. And hopefully, after this next war is over, and we've seen what nuclear weapons can really do, there might be a push for the world's people to say no more of these things. Do
you remember the UN under Dag Hammarskjöld?
Yes.
Dag Hammarskjöld died in a mysterious plane crash, and it was reported that that there was a bullet in his forehead that was airbrushed away in photos. But actually, he's the one who was responsible for averting the Suez crisis. He and his assistant, Ralph Bunche, who was an African-American, by the way, are really the ones, not Lester Pearson, who averted the Suez crisis. If we had leadership like that at the UN today, then possibly we would have hope of the UN doing what it was created to do. But instead, the UN has become so corrupt, and it's been through bribery or incompetent people or whatever has become an instrument that is actually more a source of a utility to Israel. But it's going to be tragic to see so many centuries of civilization coming to an end. There must be a way that nations can recognize that what is needed is that en masse they must say to Israel, it is you that must disarm. A lot of Jews they're the victims, and they know it now, many of them. They too must also encourage that kind of thing, and I hope that's
starting to happen. Anyway, Vivian,
I'm an atheist.
I got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. We got other callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones. A lot of callers today here, and we're going to go to Randy in Illinois. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, this is Pat in Fort Worth. Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, I wanted to talk about Jimmy Carter. I almost think that people shouldn't vote, even if they're 30 years old, because I voted for the guy. And I believe he's the guy in the Bible. It says, is this the little man who has destroyed the earth? The man put in Muslim Brotherhood with Zbigniew Brzezinski, who made the CFR right. And Mika's married Joe and all this crap, you know. I'm sorry, but I just keep thinking about that Jimmy Carter dude. We thought he was a Christian. He was nowhere near Christian. If he had stood up for getting people saved before they go to hell, he wouldn't have turned everybody against us. And, well, he had good intentions, but, you know, that paves the way to hell, right? So I'm just mad at Jimmy Carter today.
Well, okay, I guess it's his turn in the rotation. And this is actually Pat in Fort Worth. We had a little technical glitch. That little hamster in the wire wheel that powers Republic Broadcasting missed a rung there. So, Pat, thank you very much for the phone call.
Call the hamster God, because that's why we're going to get what we're going to get. Because God has given it to us. We've asked for it. We've begged for it.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to go to Randy in Illinois. Aloha, Randy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
And it's really good to hear Claire doing better, Mike.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Hey, do you remember the old TV series of Police Squad?
Yes.
Oh, thank God. Okay, I thought I was getting old.
I love that show. It was funny.
Play was awesome. Play on words, yada, yada, yada. You know, it kind of, to me at least, it seems like the world has become a very bad episode of Police Squad.
Only without the entertainment value.
This is true. As for the Israelis, you know, there's two old sayings. One of them is yours. How do you teach a dog to stop chasing cars? You let him catch one. And honestly, and I can't prove this, I could be totally wrong, but in terms of how those people, without saying that specific word, those people are a good example of why we should not let a God have booze. That's all I got. You have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to go to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, you get some good callers once in a while. That lady from Canada there, she seemed like she had all the relevant info on Israel. But,
yeah, she is a scholar. Listen, Don, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to do station identification. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And boy, have they been busy today. I'm way behind on my talking points. We're talking with Don in Iowa now. And Don, please pick up where you left off.
Yes, Israel, this guy Benjamin Netanyahu, it seems like he should be, shouldn't he make his exit here pretty quick? Like you say, the people don't like him. He's got all kinds of corruption charges. I was thinking he was there for a long time, but I see looking at Wikipedia, he had the position of prime minister from 96 to 99, then he took 10 years off, and then he started again in 2009, I guess. So it seems like he's been there forever, but he had 10-year vacation. But it seems to me if they would change the president, that might be a positive development.
I think it would be a very positive development. The only caution, of course, is you might get somebody who's even more hardline than Netanyahu, because you know the Knesset is just filled with hardliners, and they are caught up in this idea of being God's chosen people. They're raised from childhood to think that the world hates them and wants to destroy them. They are, for lack of a better word, fanatics. on that issue. I remember one time when I was still married to my first wife, and, you know, she got into this thing about how Christians all think the Jews killed Jesus, and it's taught in the churches and everything. I said, no, when I went to church, when I was very young, we were taught the Romans killed Jesus. And she lost her temper. How dare I intrude on her little fantasy world about what's going on? And it really is, it's just, their whole identity's caught up in all of this. And that's why it's going to be very, very hard to change the mindset of people who think they are automatically superior, who have this unshakable sense of entitlement and caught up with this victimhood idea.
Well, I would like to see peace in the Middle East and peace everywhere in the world if I had anything to say about it. But, you know, I only have one vote. So basically I'm just an observer. I can cast my one vote for the most peace-like candidate there is, but even that is not going to work because when he gets there and the American guy gets from the Pentagon already has their 10-year plan, and they're just going to beat him down until he goes along with it. So there's not much I can do as just a human being. I mean, yeah, you can go protest for peace, but then the newspapers don't, the press doesn't even cover it anymore.
No,
I guess
it doesn't.
I guess I'll just take it easy and see what happens. I'll talk to you later, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. I mean, obviously, we all want peace. We want prosperity. We want the freedom to turn our labor into the highest standard of living that we can and then leave that to the next generation. But we don't live in a society that allows that. This nation, I think, went into its terminal decline 100 years ago when we were enslaved to that Federal Reserve. And unfortunately, as Don said, it's not up to me. I am going to continue to speak on out, but I think this war is a really bad idea. The bankers love it. Banks love wars. They don't care which side wins or loses. They make money off of both sides. Basically transforming the blood of our children into gold in their pockets. It really is kind of sick. And I look at the Federal Reserve, or I look at any of these institutions that exploit the people, and I keep thinking to myself, there's never an asteroid around when you really need one. All right, let's get on back to the news here. As you know, the Democratic National Committee has filed this ridiculous lawsuit against the Russians, GRU, Gucci for Two, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, the Trump campaign, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and a whole bunch of other people. And it's filled with these legally nutty arguments. And it's basically just another attempt to harass the administration in their rage that Hillary was not crowned queen of the empire. And again, the optics look really bad. But it is going to blow back in their face because they're being countersued by WikiLeaks and by the Trump administration, who are demanding discovery of all the relevant documents regarding who was colluding with who and access to those servers, because the primary, you'll pardon the expression, evidence the DNC has in their lawsuit is the claim that Russia hacked the DNC servers and gave that information to WikiLeaks, that Trump knew it and allowed it to happen because it was good for his campaign. But the DNC servers have never been forensically inspected. Now, apparently, the DNC has already been told to preserve the servers as a result of all these lawsuits, which doesn't mean they haven't been in there mucking about with it during all this time. Those servers should have been seized and isolated as soon as CrowdStrike recanted their accusation that Russia did this. All right, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Again, this is going to blow back in their face here. Now, apparently, a lawsuit has been filed against this right-wing nonprofit that's aligned with House Speaker Paul Ryan, alleging the group has violated campaign finance laws and should be required to register as a political committee, which would mean disclosing its deep pocket donors. Now, those deep pocket donors don't want to be disclosed because they're now aware that the American people are now aware of the big money corruption that has wrecked this country. We know about some of the players, Sheldon Adelson, we know about George Soros. There's a lot of other people behind the scenes who are using their money to reshape the nation to their own ends. And it's a complete violation of the democratic process. And it's the reason when this country was started, there were strict limits on campaign donations so that a candidate's campaign war chest was a reflection of their popular support. And over the years, especially with that ridiculous Citizens United decision saying that corporations are persons for the purpose of freedom of speech, it's been reversed. Politicians don't go out fundraising among the people. I mean, they'll do a token effort, but if you look at the actual filings with the Federal Election Commission, you'll see that the vast majority of the money of these candidates, like Hillary Clinton, is coming in from Wall Street, large corporations, and very, very rich people. Doesn't even want to bother with the nickel and dime stuff. And that's not the way it's supposed to work, because it offers the running of this nation up for sale. You know, the TV series Storage Wars, about they go around and they open up storage lockers where the rent stops being paid and they rummage through it. I almost think we need a show called Congress Wars, where lobbyists show up at Congress and they fight over, you know, who's going to give the most money to members of Congress to get what they want. Now, here's a good one. And apparently, and this is getting zero coverage from the corporate media, but apparently, according to Federal Election Commission records, the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign laundered $84 million through the campaign in order to evade federal campaign finance law. Now, there's been a lawsuit filed in a D.C. District Court, and it summarizes the DNC Clinton conspiracy and provides detailed evidence from the FEC filings, confirming the complaint's allegations that Democrats undertook an extensive scheme to evade federal campaign limits. And you're not going to see that on the corporate media. All right, let's take another phone call. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Well, things have changed in the past 30 years or so, haven't they? Imagine if somebody back then had prophesied that Russia would be the last openly declared Christian nation, and they might be in a position where they are compelled to vaporize the state of Israel. I mean, you and I probably would have been all for committing them to an institution, but the fact is that the world's primary problem is comprised of the American ruling class and the state of Israel, and they are virtually one and the same thing, in my opinion.
Yes.
And, you know, if something should happen to them, I think we would enter a new golden age of peace and prosperity and technological development that would make all in the past pale by comparison. I don't think any group has this craven need for, you know, the dark side that these people do.
Well, don't forget the private central bankers. We will never have prosperity as long as we are being held in debt slavery, which is what private central banks are set up to do.
I count the private central bankers as part of that group. But as far as Samantha Power, Nikki Haley, she's finally come out and explained the differences between what the White House says and what she says. She said she's looking to Alexander Haig as a legal precedent.
Okay.
So, no, you know, when he said I'm in charge now, at least he was Secretary of State. You know.
Yeah.
But I think, we're going to eventually see a world war, but a hopeful thing is that if you look at the past wars, it could be said that the leadership controls it, or the people are determine who the winners are. And I can tell you there's going to be some new things under the sun, and probably some things that I'm not aware of either. I also heard something interesting. Glenn Danzig said he was talking about his controversial political beliefs, which fall on either left or right sides. And I'm all a big fan of Putin's so-called far-right advisor when he said we need to look beyond left and right. We have to remember that the bankers are the ones who created communism. And so, obviously, left and right aren't filling our need for a just and fair society. So we need to pick out the good from both and create an entirely new system. And I say that as a lifelong member of the far right. But Glenn Danzig said that the people don't want to know about all the stuff that goes on as far as national decisions, wars, the great injustices, because knowing confers responsibility.
Yes.
I think he's absolutely right. So, but that's about all I have for you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call, James. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to our news here. Now, apparently, something has come out of the McCabe probe, and this was sort of buried inside the Inspector General's report on Andrew McCabe. It was apparently the story of an August 2016 phone call from a high-ranking Justice Department official who is not named, and McCabe got the impression that this high-ranking official was trying to shut down the FBI's investigation into the Clinton Foundation while Hillary Clinton was running for president. And the official was apparently very ticked off at the FBI and demanded to know why the FBI was still pursuing the Clinton Foundation when the Justice Department considered the case dormant. And former FBI officials said the fact that a call was even made is more stunning than the content, because the Department of Justice is not supposed to call over and decide for the FBI what they should investigate and not investigate. And again, this goes back to that story where pretty much everybody inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C. is tangled up with that Clinton Foundation one way or the other. It was being used as a slush fund. It was being used as a money laundry. It was being used for tax avoidance. The one thing it was not being used for was charity. And apparently the paperwork on the foundation showed that only 6% of the revenues raised went to actual charitable activities, and the Clinton Foundation kept 94% of the rest. Now, this clearly violates the terms of being a 501c3 charitable nonprofit foundation. And the fact that the IRS still has not addressed that issue tells you just how terrified of the Clintons' corruption all of Washington, D.C. is. Because if that 501c3 was declared to be invalid because they weren't playing by the rules, then the Clintons would be personally liable for all the taxes on all of that cash. So there's a big, ugly secret in there everybody is trying to protect. And it includes the foundation, and it includes Hillary's email server. And again, it is a legitimate question to ask. If Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, was repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the materials, and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. It is a question that needs to be asked and asked again and asked again, and it's a question that deserves an answer. Now, turning to the economy, the Dow had a really, really bad day. Apparently, poor earnings reports sparked a sell-off. At one point, it was 600 points down. It ended, pardon me, 424 down. So even the plunge protection team couldn't get it back up there. And getting on back to what I said about the debt. Interesting article over at Zero Hedge talking about how America is paralyzed by the mounting debt. And ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve, the government borrows money, and the Federal Reserve issues all the public currency as a loan at interest. This is completely opposite the system the United States was set up with. It is a replay of the very banking system we fought the American Revolution to break free of. And year after year, Congress has made no payments on the principal. They just make payments on the interest. And the interest payments alone are like going to hit $1 trillion during the next decade. That is more than the U.S. spends each year on Medicaid and the military. That's where most of your money is going, that private central bank. Over the next 10 years, every American household will be taxed $55,000 just to pay the interest on the national debt. This is clearly unsustainable. Another article, this is out of Lou Rockwell, saying we may be coming to the end of the debt as currency era because a lot of people have criticized the Federal Reserve System. Mark Twain criticized it, Charles Lindbergh criticized it, basically saying that if the government can print a treasury bond, they can print a dollar bill. But the dollar bill enriches and empowers the people, and the treasury bond benefits the bankers. And that's the way it was set up to be. And the defenders of the Federal Reserve are always saying, oh, the debt doesn't really matter. There's always been debt. It's not that big a deal. Well, before the creation of the Federal Reserve, yes, there was debt. There were mortgages, there were loans for factories and so forth. But debt wasn't the basis of the entire economic system. Value was. Debt played a much, much smaller role in the U.S. economy. And back during then, we had greater progress and productivity. Story out of Investment Watch blog. Warning to all, the establishment reveals the people are liable for the debt. The central bankers are showing how nervous they are about the crypto market. They're trying to drive us back to the Federal Reserve notes because they make money off of those, but not the cryptos. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back with a phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Just to chime in on what James just said from Ohio, and to kind of go a little bit further than that, we know who the central bankers are. We really know who they are. We know who the media is. We know who Hollywood is. And I just was going to bring something up that happened in California yesterday. But before I say that, since you were in the entertainment industry,
yes,
and in L.A., you know, they film all over L.A.
Yes.
And my wife was a very senior budget person for the city. And it costs the city, which gives Hollywood, the production companies, like huge freebies, like tens of millions of dollars a year, to allow them to film for free, reroute traffic, you know, assign officers there, the whole shot. But at any rate, so there's that. They get a break on everything, all the filming they do in LA, and I know you know about that.
Yes.
It's a major pain in the butt for the citizens to have to go through this. But then, yesterday, I read where the state legislature in California gave the entertainment industry, or basically the production companies, a $330 million tax cut.
Yes.
So just to recoup, we gave the bankers $20 trillion that we know about out of our money.
Yes.
We sent Israel $40 billion over 10 years, and that's lowballing it by a large measure. You know, they can film for free in LA, and they're getting 300. So we're paying them big money. They're getting all these tax. We're being looted 6 ways from Sunday.
Okay, well, let me address that issue of the tax cuts and the tax breaks, because what is happening in entertainment right now? First of all, everybody in the world knows what Los Angeles looks like because of all the production going there, and it's one of the reasons why productions are now going elsewhere. and other countries are using tax incentives to lure the production to their shores because it provides employment for their own domestic film production people, and it's good for tourism. People like to stand around and watch a movie set while they're filming something on location. And we had similar tax incentives here in Hawaii back when I was working on Lost and Off the Map. Unfortunately, because of people saying, why are we giving these very rich Hollywood people more of our money, the tax cuts were rescinded, and as a result, several productions that had been planning to come here to Hawaii instead went down to either Mexico or New Zealand. So that's the thinking behind that. So what California is trying to do is lure film production back from other countries back to Southern California, because they do have this incredible investment in the studio system, and they don't want that to all fall apart. They don't want all those people on unemployment.
Well, Mike, I hear what you're saying, but I don't get anything for that, really. And and I'm paying for it in the city, right, as a taxpayer.
Yes.
I'm paying for it in the state as a taxpayer. I don't get anything for that. The industry, which is dominated by a particular group of people, gets all that. And another thing that always makes me angry, Mike, is when we have to pay all over the country, but here too, these billionaires to build their sports arenas at our expense.
Yes.
Bothers me greatly, and why should we be bailing out these damn billionaires? So,
well, again, the thinking behind that is a sports stadium is a job creator and a revenue creator and a source of new tax revenues, and that's the justification behind that. However, that being said, I am one of those people who think that these billionaire owners of these sports teams ought to be building their own stadiums. But they could then turn around and say, well, we're not going to share, the revenue with the local government. So it's a little more complex than you might, on first view, think it is.
Well, I know it is, and I know that there's a certain amount of ripple effect for having the industry here and all, but I also know that they're not paying any taxes, and I am. That bothers me.
Well, they're still paying taxes. They're not paying as much. The tax incentives are not a complete write-off. It is a reduction to make it more attractive economically to continue filming in California. So the studios are still paying taxes. The movie theaters are still paying taxes. The distribution companies are still paying taxes. And again, it's an effort to keep filmmaking in California in light of so many movies that are now being made in other countries around the world.
I got you, Mike. Don't like it, but I understand it.
Well, it's a complex business, but you always remember that show business is first and foremost a business. Even setting aside all this stuff about Harvey Weinstein and his extracurricular activities. Anyway, listen, Peter, we're going to let you go. We're coming up on another commercial break here, and we'll be right back with more news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news here. We're talking about the 400 trillion with a T pension crisis. There isn't enough money out there to bail this system out. And most of these pensions were defunded during that 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to probably demand that pension contributions go up and that pension benefits be slashed. But they might want to be careful about that, because they tried doing that in Nicaragua, and it's triggered nationwide riots. And it's gotten so violent and deadly, the State Department is pulling their embassy staff out of the country. So you never know what's going to tip the people over the edge. It's like when you look at the Romanian Revolution. 2 weeks before it all happened, you were just walking around Romania, you would have thought everything's fine. A lot of TV cameras on the street lights and everything. And then all of a sudden there was this sporting event. And it just all of a sudden turned into a political rally. 2 weeks later, Ceausescu was machine gunned to death on Romanian national TV. So you don't know what could set it off. Russia bought 300,000 ounces of gold in March. They are coming up on 2,000 tons in gold reserves. That's a lot of gold. Now, Turkey has brought their gold home as well. Everybody's grabbing the gold because they know the dollar is doomed, and they want to have something on which to base a new value-based currency. Sudan has now invited Russia to take part in that country's oil and gas projects. And it's another example of how, as the U.S. gets more and more militaristic and less economical, countries are pivoting away. They're pivoting to Russia. They don't want war. They want to do business. BRICS is talking about creating a new international trade currency of their own, which, if adopted by the BRICS nations and others, would be another sledgehammer blow to the dollar. Now, the only thing propping up our economy right now is the foreign demand for petrodollars. And if that goes away, the domestic economy is going to collapse. There's nothing else left to hold it up. We don't have enough manufacturing. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. It is all going to come apart. We don't know when, but the time to start preparing for it is right the heck now. Now, the U.S. is wringing its hands over China's latest technological accomplishment, or plan rather. China is planning to build a high-speed rail connecting Kunming in its Yunnan province with the rest of Southeast Asia. And they're already in the planning stage. They're moving forward on this. In the landlocked nation of Laos, the tunnels and bridges are already under construction. And the United States is out there saying, how dare you do that? How dare you build an efficient train system? And of course, the United States, along with most of Europe, has condemned China's One Belt, One Road infrastructure program. And U.S. and European policies are saying Beijing is trying to create a debt trap diplomacy. No, China is just investing in the future. They're investing in infrastructure, which the U.S. can't do because all of its money is going to the machinery of war. And our infrastructure is crumbling. We can't compete with China in this area. But rather than say, let's pull back on the wars and spend that money making our nation great again, they go on out and say, you shouldn't do that. It's unfair. It's unfair for you to have this One Belt, One Road. It's unfair for you to have high-speed trains. You're just being mean to us now. All right, let's take a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Pensions, but first I want to make a comment about stadiums. You know, the Raiders Stadium in Las Vegas, and this is a typical example of how they do it and why they do it. They do the bond offering, which takes forever to pay off, but they front load it with all sorts of crap like hiring minorities. So many persons, you have to have so many black people working there. You have to have so many, whatever. It's all front loaded with that. That's one of the main reasons. Now the pensions, Mike, don't sweat it. Gas is going back to $4 or $5 a gallon, and that's what the high price of gas does. It throws off all those profits from the oil companies into those pension funds. So I think Trump's got it under control. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay, well, you're welcome, but I definitely disagree. We know Social Security is underfunded, going back to Bill Clinton. We know that both public and private pensions are looking at serious shortfalls. They can't pay the promised benefits. And again, all the nation's wealth has been sucked up by the private central banks and the war machine and Israel. There is nothing left. Americans are literally living on the scraps falling from the tables of our royalty. That's not a way for a free people to be living. Okay, Trump has laid down the law regarding these illegal caravans, and Attorney General Sessions has given the order. Anyone crossing the border will be arrested, detained, and deported. I hope they have a lot of people down there because that caravan is very, very large. And I think the thinking of the caravan is some of us may get arrested, but most of us will make it through. And I think it would be very good to have enough manpower down there where that caravan is coming across to basically dissuade them from that notion. And it's time to deal with this. And I think a good object lesson right now is Colombia, because as you know, Venezuela they're in the middle of an economic collapse, and as a result, migrants are leaving Venezuela, pouring into Colombia without any control, and now Colombia's economy is feeling the strain. Apparently, they're getting more than 100,000 a month, most of them illegally crossing the border. Let's take a phone call. Jeff in Georgia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. You got the greatest show on earth.
Thank you.
Yesterday, Bernie Sanders. Bernie, can you hear me well?
You're on the air.
Yeah. Yesterday, Bernie Sanders called for full employment. I call for full employment, but the difference between me and Bernie is he's controlled by bankers, and I want to be free from bankers. Okay? Full employment's a great ideal. Everybody on earth should be employed that's able to work. But he will keep the bankers in control. Michael, everybody's calling in about our monetary situation. You talked about Venezuela. The world owes $100 trillion. You agreed with me one time that the fraudulent fractional banking system is fraudulent. You can call for debt relief by saying we need to cancel the debt. And we need to do it holding hands with other countries. Because if we let the bankers are smarter than us. I want to tell you right now, that's how they've controlled us for hundreds of years. They are smarter. But we collectively can compete against them by taking away their power, and it's their money. When you call for debt relief and the cancellation of the debt, if a politician in this country called for the cancellation of the debt and to do it internationally, you would have people all around the earth marching to do that, because if money is loaned from major banks and they don't have the money, it's fractional banking.
Yes.
We can legitimately cancel that. Yes, sir.
No, I was just clearing my throat.
Yeah. Yes, Michael,
well,
that's...
let me back up to what you just said. I don't know if you can legitimately cancel the portion of your debt that was created with fractional reserve banking. I agree it's a scam and a fraud. Unfortunately, the bankers own the politicians, and the politicians write the law, and the law says that you are, you're in debt for the full amount of the principal plus the accruing interest. And I understand that what you're saying is that the money is created illegitimately through fractional reserve banking. But again, you have to be very careful what you want to do about it. If you want to stay on the side, if you want to stay out of jail, is basically what it comes on down to. I think any politician who stood up and called for debt relief would probably be assassinated almost immediately. And that's based on the history that I researched for my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, which you might be having a time. We're going to have to see the system collapse on down. And it is on the verge of collapse because there literally is not enough money to pay off all this debt. It's going to have to come down. And when we restart civilization, we're going to have the very first law carved in stone. No more private central banks, no more debt-based currency. All monetary units are based on a unit of intrinsic value.
Michael, when a nation breaks down, it will go the pattern that it has for millennia. It will break down into violence. It will break down into street wars. We have to reform it and try to prevent that. I mean,
well,
we
I'd
owe
like
it
to prevent it,
to
but
the
you
future
can't.
Of our kids.
You can't reform a system that doesn't want to reform. You can't reform a system that is protected by the political system. Unless you want to resort to violence, and I'm not ready to cross that line.
Okay, well, I'm not for violence, Michael, but hey, you got a great show. God bless you, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And again, if you go back and you look at the history of the French Revolution, they did initially target the bankers before they worked their way up to Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, because the French understood who were the instruments of their oppression. Not the author of it, that was the royalty, the nobility. but the instrument of their oppression was the bank. And we have that same situation here right now. We have been sold back into the same system of predatory banking we fought the revolution to break free of. Now, apparently over in the European Union, there's this Bjarni Benediktsson, who's Iceland's finance minister, and he's concerned about protecting their national interests while the EU is trying to bring Iceland into the collective, and Iceland doesn't want to go. The EU brands Iceland's independence as a nuisance. So the EU is trying to expand, gobble up more countries. Iceland's a nice place. Leave them alone. Okay, another phone call. Mike in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Hi. I heard you guys talking about, what we're going to do about all this debt. And, well, instead of, if people just wouldn't participate, I think that's the first thing, meaning, we have cryptocurrencies, and they're here to stay, all right? But, you have two sides to the story saying, it's a fraud, and it could be hacked into, and, there's nothing backing it up. But you know what? All of those excuses pertain to the situation we're in with central banking, the fractional reserve, creation of debt.
Yes.
It's people are they're a little bit afraid of computers, and they're a little bit. I mean, look, in the past 10 years, when I was a kid, nobody had a cell phone. I mean, all of a sudden in the past few years, everybody's looking at their cell phone. Everybody's, on social media. Everybody's very familiar with. We have the power to actually just not participate. And I think in a non-participation, you won't have violence and civil unrest and, global wars and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see which way this goes, because the debt is going to be a big problem. And sooner or later, there's going to be no way that Jose, there is no way Jose now with the unfunded liabilities. But therefore, I don't know. Like I said, when Bitcoin first came out, I thought this was definitely going to be our redemption. But I guess it's just going to have to take time. And I hope it doesn't explode.
The private central banks are already pushing back against the cryptos because they're not making interest on the cryptos because they're not loaned into circulation. It's the same rationale they had to get rid of John F. Kennedy's United States note. Okay? And when the economic collapse comes, people are going to basically turn to whatever is at hand that represents a known medium of exchange. Whether it's going to be script that's printed up at the local level. There was an interesting story about how this newspaper in this town during the Depression of the 1930s printed up these certificates for free advertising, took them around to the local stores to get the paper and ink and other supplies necessary to run the newspaper. And these little certificates for the advertising were eventually seen as more trustworthy than the U.S. paper dollar. And the entire town started using them as their currency. White seashells, or who knows what's going to be grabbed onto. Could be cryptocurrency. I think if there is a collapse, though, the computers on which the cryptocurrency are running may be inaccessible. And I think people have an instinctive desire to actually hold their wealth in their own hands and decide where it's going to go. So I don't think crypto is going to work. Plus, a lot of states are already starting to pass laws against the cryptocurrencies. Here in Hawaii, they passed a law, I can't own a Bitcoin wallet in this state. And, this is obviously coming down from the bankers.
That's because it's decentralized. You just answered what I was just going to say. It's decentralized, and they can't get their hands on it. They can't, they do all the things that they're doing, loaning it out at interest, okay? They have no interest. And, so, Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments, and I guess I got to get going. So.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Now then, over back in the European Union, and this is probably especially a dig at Viktor Orban and Hungary, the EU is now going to start dispersing funds to the member states, not on the basis of what countries need them, but on the basis of values. In other words, they're basically spending the money on those nations that support EU values, including the acceptance of mass migration. So they're applying financial pressure there. We're going to take another break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program today. Catching up on the news here. Apparently, the billionaire Koch brothers are demanding Congress pass amnesty for the DACA illegal aliens as quickly as possible. Still pushing that globalist open border agenda. And again, they're caught up with this idealism, of one planet, one government, one private central bank. And they're oblivious to the problems this is causing all over not only the United States, but Europe as well. And their attitude seems to be, well, so some women are getting raped and there's been an increase in murders, but it's a small price to pay for our dream of a one world government. And I know that globalists have been around for a very, very long time. And every time they try and make a push for a global government, it usually blows up in their face, and I think it's about to in this case as well. Because nothing is going to put an end to the one world government idea quicker than a global nuclear war. Over in Great Britain, and this is one of those where you scratch your heads and say, how do people like this get into positions of power and authority? 3 former Telford lawmakers, including one who oversaw the social services department during the town's Muslim rape gang epidemic, have now been exposed as pedophiles. Apparently, Graham Bould, 60 years old, was convicted in 2001 for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy in Telford. He served as chairman of the Shropshire County Council's Social Services Department from 1993 to 1998. The same victim was also sexually assaulted by an Anglican vicar and county councillor, Michael Keane, who's 78 years old. Keane was in prison for 15 months, but Bould avoided a prison term because he admitted to sexually assaulting the child. I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I'm not even all that curious for any kind of an explanation. It's wrong. Absolute wrong. Anyway, apparently, over in Massachusetts, there's been a bit of a dust-up. This is a flashback story, but it's got a postscript to it. There was this Massachusetts lab technician, Sonia Farak, who was in charge of the lab that tested drugs confiscated by the police from accused drug criminals. Only her idea of testing them was to take some of them herself. And in 2014, Farak was sentenced to 18 months in prison, was released in 2015. It took another 3 years for the courts to toss 11,000 convictions tainted by this worker. So this lab technician was out of prison before the people she had helped wrongfully convict. Now, there's a $5.7 million civil case against Farak brought by Ronaldo Canati, who was convicted using her testimony. On the day Sonia tested the drugs involved in his case, she had smoked crack in the bathroom, in addition to taking acid or LSD. And the man served over 5 years in prison based on her tripped-out testimony before his conviction was vacated. Now, where was management and supervision? That's what I want to know. So, Farak is apparently arguing that even if the jury had known she was high, they still would have convicted him. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for the John Stadmiller program. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and on the whatreallyhappened.com website. Share them with everybody that you know. Forget about social media. It's being heavily filtered. Just talk to people. Let's go back to the days of the sneaker net. Put down that tablet and smartphone and actually talk to other people. You'll find it's a rewarding Oh, actually, Chris Hinckley is filling in for John Stadmiller today. I just got that word. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.